Hi everybody, welcome back to Interactive Media. Today we are going to cover essentially how to write a user research study. So there's a couple components that I want you to keep in mind as we go through this exercise. We will just verbally talk through one together, and then we will move into a scenario where you get to write one about a game. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So as I mentioned, you are watching interactive media video on how to write a user research plan. So in our last class, we talked a lot about user research and the differences between user research and all the other types of research you'll be conducting in this class. And then we kind of talked through different stages in which you can introduce research. Today, we're going to focus specifically on the plan so that you can conduct a study. So when writing a research plan, there's a couple of big questions that we need answered before we can even get started with talking to people. So essentially what we need is information on how you want to run your study and why. So that's kind of the big high level take from this. Now, for your research plan, the ones that you'll be submitting will be a lot more detailed and specifically answering these questions. I do have a format for you that you can follow, but this is just a guideline of the types of things I need you to keep in mind as you're writing your plan and as you are conducting your study. So the first thing is tell us what you're looking to learn. So pretend that I am someone who just picks this document up off the floor and I see your plan, and I can pretty much do everything on my own without actually having to talk to you. So the first thing is I need to know what you're looking to learn. So aside from being told that you have to do a user research study, what's something that you want to learn about your product or the kind of people that use your product or the kind of problems that these people face while using products like these. So I would like to see you explore the what. So exactly what you want to learn well before you start formulating questions or study plan, because without knowing why you're going to conduct this research, it's very hard to have a firm grasp on all these smaller details that are important. The next thing is I need you to tell me how you will learn it. So we talked about a couple of research methodologies earlier. There's also the research book that you have and a few other resources I've given you in the previous lecture. So when you go through that information, select a couple of activities that will help you uncover what you're looking to learn. So the how is specific to the methodology of the types of things that you can do, like the activities you can run so that you can learn that information. The next part of your research plan, this will be more towards the end of your plan when you've already ran your study, but in your document you'll also include what you learned from your study and from your participants. So were there any behaviors or attitudes and trends that were important to note? Were there competitor apps that we should keep in mind as you design your product? Is there any particular sentiment that we need to be aware of or uneasiness on behalf of the product user that we need to know before we start essentially designing your product? So this is your opportunity to essentially explain what happened in those sessions and the things that you learned that you will then apply to this project. And then the next point is obviously how you apply the information. So at this stage, you don't have the design work yet, but once you have your design work and you test it and you talk to your users or your customers, what I want to see here are actual specific things that you need to address in your design or that you need to address in your product concept. So does it require you to completely change everything that you were working on? Does it require just a couple of visual edits here and there or a change of color? This will be very specific to your project and what you've designed and the type of questions that you've asked. From there, you will then, for the purposes of this half semester long project, you will then apply those changes to your design and then show kind of the before and after, so we can see how your product improved through the use of data. And that is a summary of essentially what I've just said. I'll leave this up for a brief moment so that you can read it. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do as we're formulating our research plan is actually writing an interview guide. So when we had started with some of our earlier exercises in interviewing people, we didn't actually have any specific set of questions that we put together. And those exercises were meant to be open-ended and more conversational. But for the purposes of your research project, you will actually need to put together beforehand a list of questions and screeners that you can ask to make sure that you get the information you want. We don't need to be formulaic with these questions at all. Let them be a guide to you while you're conducting your research and as you're conducting your interviews, because it's a little bit difficult to break out of this researcher and participant role that you have, the dynamic that you have during your research sessions. So I would try not to, formulaically read from a list of questions or take too many notes by hand. Like, I would definitely use other mechanisms to record your information and your research session in general. But I would have this list of questions kind of written out beforehand of the things that you need to learn and specifically how you need to ask your participants. So for today's exercise, we are going to go ahead and write a research plan, but not for your project. I actually want you to have a little bit of practice first before you dive in to your specific app. So for today's exercise, I want you to choose a mobile game. So any mobile game, could be Candy Crush, could be Snake, running out of Plants vs. Zombies, running out of games. But yes, so there's a lot of games on your phone. So go ahead and choose one that you can choose something that you like or something that you don't like. You can download one from the store and do it brand new. But I would suggest using something that's currently on your phone, and maybe something that you've played in the last month. So once you've selected the game that you want to write a study for, what we need to do is make sure that we ask the right questions. And the only way we can do that is to first set up an objective. So I mentioned that a little bit earlier in our previous video. So your objective is essentially the reason. So what's the reason? Why are you running this study aside from me telling you to? What exactly is it that you want to learn? So in my example, I am testing the game Tetris, and my objective for my user study is to learn about music and its potential for distraction during strategy games. So I have a design hypothesis that the game Tetris, not only because it speeds up, it adds a level of stress for the players. But then when music is actually layered on, it actually makes it more stressful. So like your heart rate actually increases, the blood rushes to your skin, so you get a little bit warm or flush. But there's a nervousness that sets in that's kind of one above what stress level they would normally have playing a game like this without sound. So that's my hypothesis. When you write down your objective, I want you to consider a couple of different questions. So is it measurable? Can you observe it? Or could you even directly ask this as a question? So with stress levels of Tetris, I can definitely measure it. So I can measure like the amount of like panic, so like kind of people being frozen, not knowing what to do, or just kind of hitting buttons or hitting arrows in a really like stressful manner, or the way that they talk, maybe like kind of rapid breathing, staring at the screen, etc. So there are ways that we can measure it, and because this session will be done all in person, we can definitely observe all of these insights that we're about to uncover. And then can I directly ask this as a question? So an example would be, I want to learn if the music in the game Tetris is a distraction when playing that game. So that'd be an example of rewriting that as a question. The next thing that you should focus on is the statement, this is significant because. So not every research problem needs to have a project behind it. Here I want you to think about why this is important for the success of your project. But in this scenario, we're writing this study about a game. So how will uncovering this information positively impact this product? So what is it that I can learn from it that would actually make a difference when it came down to making decisions about design or marketing or branding? So here, my example for this is significant because sound design is a crucial component of game experiences, and measuring the use of music during gameplay can allow us to optimize when and where to insert sounds, especially sound effects and ambient music. So here, from a interactive design perspective, I'm trying to balance out game mechanics, and that's kind of that second or third layer of experience design with sound and reaction, and making the game either more exciting or a little bit more stressful, and then also conveying when someone wins or someone loses. One key consideration for you at this stage is that you need to be able to gather information for this. So yes, it is, whatever statement you put here would be definitely important, but it kind of goes back to that first one where if it's not measurable, it's not helpful. So in this case, how can you gather data for this specific statement? So I would say that I can probably gather how long it takes someone to complete a session, or like how many levels do they complete in Tetris before they stop, and then compare that with sound on and sound off and see how they do. So do they play better with music, or do they play better without it? So for our exercise, we want to go ahead and start working through this format. So the first thing is, what will you ask? So these are the types of questions. This is your interview guide essentially for your participants. So go ahead and write down 10 different questions that you plan on asking during your session. So the next thing that we want to write down are a couple names of the people that you will be interviewing. So if you're doing this in class, you will most likely pull a couple classmates together for this interview session. If you're doing it remotely, meaning you didn't get a chance to come to class, then you would want to write down 3 names of people that you know that you can actually talk to in person with the game on your phone. So go ahead and write down 3 different names. So here are a couple of examples of how, like, what will you measure. So here we've written down a couple of different types of data that we can collect. So we have qualitative data points and quantitative data points. And qualitative data is essentially things that you can describe using words or adjectives and adverbs. But then with quantitative data, we're looking at more numerical values that we can measure. So for your qualitative data points for gameplay in particular, with a focus on Tetris, I can say that I'm looking for different types of facial expressions so that I can categorize them as confused or angry, anxious, sad, etc. I'm also looking for self-deprecating quotes. That tends to come up a lot with game design, which is kind of an interesting insight. I also want to look at breathing patterns. So do people sigh or take deep breaths, or do they hold their breath even while they're playing this game? And then any observations I may have about the way that they're sitting. So are they sitting up straight? Are they hunched over? Do they lay back? Do they walk around while they play, etc.? For quantitative data points, a couple of numerical values that we can measure with this type of study would be, how many lines do they complete until their game is over? So essentially, how many times can they make the line of Tetramino is going to disappear because they've done something successfully, and try to measure that before they clear it and go to the next game. We can then also look at the number of successful games that they played until they feel like stopping. So maybe there's some sort of exhaustion ceiling that they hit where they get stressed out and they actually don't want to play anymore. I could also measure the number of lines, so the number of completed lines that it took for them to start talking negatively about themselves. Again, the self-deprecating language tends to come up in game design, so it's something that I want to look for. The next thing I can consider for quantitative data points would be a Likert scale of how much fun that they're having playing the game. So a Likert scale is self-reported, and it tends to be like on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate, how fun this game was? And like 1 would be not so fun, and 5 would be the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. So that's just called the Likert scale. And you can do a different one for your project. just based on what you want to measure. And then you can also reuse the Likert scale to gauge, or to have your participant gauge how hard it was to play the game. So it can be fun and it can be hard. And those are kind of two like very different ways of looking at the same problem. So you're asking them to compare and contrast almost. From there, you'll then take your information that you have for quantitative data and qualitative data and explain how you can document this information. So again, in order for this information to be useful and helpful to us, we actually need to be able to find the information through your interview sessions or through a gameplay session. So here I want you to actually walk through how someone, or how you will be able to essentially uncover and document that data. So I don't want to go through an entire exhaustive list here, but for facial expressions, maybe for every participant, I have like this facial expressions sheet where it has different expressions or different emojis, and then I can circle which ones that they were displaying while playing. For quantitative data points, this is where I also kind of specify how that information is collected and how I structure either forms or pieces of paper, or just record the information overall. Okay, so for our exercise in class, I generally ask that you partner with someone that you haven't met yet. So this is a great opportunity to meet other people. You will designate one person as the interviewer and the next person as an interviewee. You will conduct one interview, so one facilitator, one interviewee. They run one interview, and then after 10 minutes, you'll then switch roles. So you stay with the same partner, but now the person who's asking the questions is actually the person being interviewed. Okay, so now that you're back, you've got some great experience in actually writing a study and conducting one. And now there's actually a great video that I'd love you to watch. I will include it in the notes for class. And it's essentially the Nordstrom Innovation Lab. So it's actually going through the design process as research versus conducting research up front before doing design work. So it's just a different way to think about your projects. Yeah, so enjoy.